Greetings and welcome. You've just tuned in for the latest transmission of Rice Against the Grain. And on today's show, I am joined by a very special guest, Larken Rose. He is the author of several books, including The Most Dangerous Superstition, screenwriter for the feature film The Jones Plantation. He is also a content creator and public speaker for over 2 decades, advocating for the principles of self ownership, non aggression, and a stateless society. Don't forget to visit ricetvx.com, where you can watch both of my YouTube channels, Rice Crypto and Rice Against the Grain, directly. Find all of my social media links, sign up for my mailing list, and become a member of Rice Uncensored, where you can join me on the private side for less than $0.25 a day. You will get early access to both Rice Crypto and Rice Against the Grain, ad-free, unedited videos, exclusive content, members-only forum with direct access to me, live streams, and more to come, only at ricetvx.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is a very special guest, somebody that I've been looking forward to talking to for quite some time. I met him in person back in 2018, and we talked about doing an interview, and here we are, February of 2024. We're making it happen. Larken, I appreciate you coming on the show. I am joined by Larken Rose. How you doing, Larken?
Good, and I'm glad this finally worked, which was mostly my fault. It took so long.
It's
I'm
all
an
good, man.
introvert and hide from
Well,
substance.
and I'll go through phases of trying to reach out to people and then follow back up, like sometimes 6-9 months, a year later. So some of it's on my end. So I was just being a little facetious, but I appreciate you again, man. And I appreciate everything that you've been doing throughout the years. To give a little bit of an introduction as to who Larken Rose is, if people are unfamiliar, which hopefully many people watching are familiar with who you are. But you are an author of several books, including The Most Dangerous Superstition. I've been reading my copy again to catch up on it. Powerful book. Creator of the communication course, Candles in the Dark. Screenwriter for the feature film, The Jones Plantation. Content creator and public speaker for over 2 decades, advocating the principles of self ownership, non aggression, and a stateless society. I myself, Larkin, personally discovered you in the documentary America Freedom to Fascism. And I think you're either my third or fourth guest that's been in that documentary. I think you're the third. So I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation. Was there anything that I missed with your introduction?
No, that'll do. I mean, I've done 8 gazillion videos and articles, but not
Yeah,
worth
and
mentioning.
that's kind of an understatement. So I'll have a link for your YouTube channel. I encourage people to go over there, subscribe. You're putting out videos very frequently. I'm going to have a link for your Twitter account so people can follow you at Larken_Rose. I'll also have links for your website, therosechannel.com. We're going to be talking about Jones Plantation, the feature film. So we'll be sharing the website, and you will also be appearing at Anarchist 2024 Reborn. Freedom is Rising. You want to go ahead and share some information, get that out of the way about what you're going to be talking about or what we can expect at Anarchist with Larken Rose this year?
Yeah, in fact, that's less than a week. That's a week from yesterday. My
Yeah.
talk will be about when humanity grows up, and it's basically describing the process that humanity has been going through for centuries, but is going to go through no matter what we do. Now, I want to get it there as fast as possible with as little suffering and injustice in between as possible. But my talk is basically spelling out the mental evolution of humanity to the point where, like, I don't even think we're to where we count as humanity having started yet. Like, if you look at human history, for a lot of it, we've been a stupid, violent, short-sighted species, and bits and pieces of humanity have shown up along the way where people are figuring out, maybe we shouldn't like violently attack each other. But it's been a slow, like horribly gruesome path getting there because like our philosophical understanding even of basic things like self-ownership was very outpaced by our technological understanding. So now we can blow up people on the other side of the world by pressing a button. We just can't comprehend the fact that maybe we shouldn't do that. So, but I'm very optimistic about the future, more so than almost anybody I know. And I I like to try to give people some hope when it's, when they're looking out at the world and seeing all the idiocy going on and the violence and the oppression and all the things people are still falling for. Like, there's a lot of reasons that people look at, the daily news and just feel like, we're doomed. This is hopeless. And it isn't. And so one of the main things that the talk is going to cover is why not only is it not hopeless, but statism is absolutely doomed to collapse. I just want it to happen faster rather than slower.
Sooner than later. Yeah, no, I get you. It's really interesting after, like, seeing all your work and seeing where you are today and hearing that you're still hopeful, because I would kind of think that you might become bitter, resentful that people aren't listening, aren't waking up. Another, I think you're from Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. Mark Passio's from the Philadelphia area, and he's kind of taking the bitter path, it seems, a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
Which
I think
I get the frustration. Sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
There's plenty worth criticizing and condemning and being frustrated about. But having done this for 27 years and being really frustrated for about 15 or 20 of those years, there's a different mindset if you can back up and see the bigger picture that goes way beyond our tiny little lives. Like, if we live to be 100, like, good job, but that's still a tiny sliver in human history. And it's easy when you're engaged in debating people who are, like, making excuses for their own enslavement and stuff to get really frustrated and angry and thinking we're all doomed. And I sympathize with the people who think that. But if you actually back up to the bigger picture, you can see the steady trend going back for centuries that is absolutely headed in the direction of people giving up the belief in government entirely. Now, we're not there, and the vast majority of people still fall for that lie. But even the ways in which government has to lie and deceive people are, like, it's discouraging to watch people still falling for it, but it's actually encouraging that they have to go to those lengths to get people to cheer for authoritarianism. Because if somebody just says, give me power because I like bossing people around, nobody would go for that. But instead, it's like, there's a big scary disease, or there's a scary army that's going to invade us from, there's something scary, and you have to give me power to protect you from something scary. The fact that they have to go to those lengths to keep duping people into going along with it, yeah, it's sad that it's still working, but it's very promising that they can't. I mean, for most of human history, they could just say, hey, the people over there have some stuff we want, let's just go kill them and take it. That's most of human history, is people doing that. And now that doesn't work because most people are
Right.
like, that's not okay. You have to paint the enemy as a scary threat to us. And even that's falling apart. Like little, quote unquote, little events that barely get mentioned in the media, like the US military for the first time ever hasn't been able to keep up with their recruitment efforts. That's a really good sign for humanity.
It
And
is.
so
It
I
is,
like that.
Larkin. It is. Look, since you said that about the recruitment thing, I had to interrupt, and I apologize. But I went to the post office the other day, and I've been going to the post office semi regularly to mail out some items. And for the first time, this was on February 2nd, so 4 days ago, and they must have just put them out for February. And I was going to try to go to some more post offices and see if I see these. But it's been a long time since I'm 48, and it's been a long time since I've seen one of these. You remember these?
Yeah.
It didn't quite look like this, but yeah, this is a brand new pamphlet. And it also states that basically undocumented non-citizens would have to do this as well, which is interesting considering what's happening at our border. I just thought that was, with what you said about the low number of our military personnel, what's happening at the border, and now it's a law, and it's the only thing I don't get is the push for men to register, because it seems like in this world that we're living in today, it should be um, everybody, because it seems like they're trying to make everybody like unisex anyway. So it should be like everybody must register, not just men.
I think they know they couldn't get away with that. Like, telling some 18-year-old valley girl that you have to sign up to be a killer on the other side of the world. That's not going to fly, even with all their, all the
Right.
social stuff they're pushing. They know they can't get away with that yet.
Well, I definitely want to kind of get into a lot of your thoughts on current events, but I want to like focus on some of the things that you've been doing recently. I talked about you being a screenwriter for the feature film Jones Plantation, because I heard you say it's not the Jones Plantation, although the website you said is the Jones Plantation.
Well, that's
So,
the trick. The novel has a "the" in it. The movie doesn't.
okay. And you can
So the
find information, people who want to know more information, you can find this right at the Larken Rose channel dot, is that, am I saying the rose channel.com slash Jones, and I'll have this link down below as well. You can order the novel, because I had asked you, you have a, years ago you put out like a 12-minute long animation story about the Jones Plantation, and I was curious. I told you I was like really curious how you were going to turn this into a full-length film, and you told me that the screenplay, I guess, you had written up came up to be over 3 hours, or around 3 hours. So you, in addition to the film, decided to put out a book as well. Can you talk about the inspiration of what made you decide to come up with this whole story of Jones Plantation, or the Jones Plantation?
well, the original animated one from what, 15 years ago? I forget how long ago I even did that. It just I do a lot of videos and articles that use analogies, because it makes it easier for people to think about stuff when there's an analogy. And the analogy of a slave plantation, where the slaves recognize that they're slaves, and they recognize this isn't okay, and this is horrible. Like, you're going to have trouble with your slaves if they recognize that they're the victims of abuse. So I thought, well, that makes for a really convenient allegory to have a guy come in who basically like teaches the slave owners, well, you don't want them to think that you're the bad guy and that you're enslaving them. You want them to think that you're representing them and serving them. And so the even the animated one goes through a few of the tricks that Mr. Smith teaches Mr. Jones how to do to make his slaves more obedient. And it was actually the director, Andrew Treglia, director of the movie. He saw that video and thought, what about making that into an actual movie? And the moment I heard that, I was like, why didn't I think of that? And so there, inside that allegory, there's so many things that could be covered and talked about, that, yeah, the first rough draft of the script would have been like over 3 hours long, which that doesn't work for a movie. It would have been fun for a mini series if we had the
Right.
time and fun for that. But, um, and so in the process of making the movie, so the first thing is like, okay, that's cool. Hack it down to like half that. Um, but in the process of shortening the script, and then in the process of shooting the movie, there's a lot of stuff that had to be cut out and skipped and stuff. So while we were shooting it, and I was getting frustrated because like there's important points, I don't want them to just disappear. And so I had the rough draft of Jones Plantation, the novel, finished by the time we finished our like 10-day or 14, I guess it was 17-day shoot or something, I forget.
Okay.
And so partly that was just therapy, but partly that was because a book can do certain things and a movie can do certain things. Everything he did to the movie, he should have. Like, what he shortened, what he abbreviated, what he took out made the movie better. And the movie now does what the movie should do. And I just decided, well, I'll make a novel so the novel can do what the novel can do. And they both go together. They're not supposed to compete. They're the same story. It's just a story in book form can do certain things that a movie can't, and a movie can obviously do a bunch of things that a book can't. So I'm happy that there's both, which is sort of weird. I don't know if anybody's ever done that where they come out at the same time from the
Right.
same people, but that
Well, I
was
mean,
our solution.
it makes sense if you had that much extra material. How much footage would you say was cut out?
It wasn't even a matter of footage. It was a matter of rewriting a scene like right before we shoot it. Because like almost every night of the shoot, the night before, I'm hiding in the basement of this like 160-year-old house down in Mississippi, like rewriting. He's like, okay, this is really cool. Now make it this long instead of 3 pages long. It's like, "Arr." And sometimes we had to like change the plot and alter things. And so it wasn't a matter of we got a bunch of footage and cut it back, as we cut it back before it was even footage. Because we were hacking down scenes right and left just about every night, and pretty brutally hacking them back because we realized this is going to add up to even what we had left from what I had whittled down was still going to be too long. So I was rewriting scenes for a few hours and then working on the novel for a few hours and then having my immune system completely collapse from sleep deprivation. But
It
that was
sounds like
fun.
it, man. It sounds like it. But now here's what I'll say. When I discovered the animation and the short story of Jones Plantation, I mean, I found it to be extremely powerful. To explain the basic concept, and I don't really want to give that away. I want people to check this out if you're not familiar. Again, the links will be down below. The animation, it's like 12 minutes long, and then you can watch and this is on the rosechannel.com/Jones. And you can also see the trailer for Jones Plantation movie. I watched the movie. You gave me access, which I greatly appreciate, which I found that to be obviously even more powerful. So, I mean, I really like the way that you describe things. Even going back to the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. I mean, you do a great job of being able to explain this idea of authority and our belief in authority and giving authority to other people. So I really appreciate what you did with the powerful story of the Jones Plantation. It was one thing I was curious about while you guys were making it is it's obviously a very tender subject. So there's a lot of words and actions that take place that was everybody comfortable with doing all of that? I'm assuming they were if they knew what the story was about.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about that at different points. The guy who played Mr. Jones, who did an awesome job, wasn't an actor before. He's a pro freedom guy. He has his own podcast called The Quash, um, and he talked about not only the yelling the N word at people because he's the slave owner in the story, but even just the mentality of because we were filming in places that used to be slave plantations, and it wasn't that long ago, like a century and a half ago. And so he talked a little bit about the weirdness of getting into the mindset and realizing there were people doing this like right here. There were people who actually thought they owned other people. And so sort of reenacting that is inherently creepy, whether you're on the side of like a decent person pretending to be a slave owner or, a non-slave pretending to be a slave and getting into the mindset. And I don't know which of those would be a harder role, but the cast was just awesome on both sides of that. The ones very much getting into the personality of, they were trained to grovel, obey, and be meek. And that wasn't, it's easy for us to think, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have stood up. Well, if you were trained from the day you were born to think of yourself as somebody else's property, you'd probably think of yourself as somebody else's property. And
Right.
so the whole cast did an awesome job. But yeah, portraying a real world situation. Obviously, the story is fictional, more or less, kind of
It's not
fictional.
really fictional at all. I don't think that actually happened. Especially, I don't think that Mr. Smith would have been the color that Mr. Smith was in reality. I don't see that happening.
Even that was the thing we decided early on, and it's not that way in the animated version, but in the early meetings that I was having with the director Andrew, because we found out we actually met in Mexico and we found out we both live in Phoenix, so we had early meetings about the project in some random warehouse in Phoenix, um, and very early on it was my idea to have Smith be a former slave because, and that's not much of a spoiler because you find that out like 2 seconds into the movie anyway.
Yeah, well, it's kind of part of the promotion too. So yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
it's
in the
kind of hard to
trailer.
get.
It's very obvious. Yeah.
He's like totally in your face. But the it was important to me because of how hard politicians try to make everything about any way they can divide people, black and white, or rich and poor, or male and female, or, different nationalities, that I didn't want people to mistake this for, because it's in that setting, it's very easy to think, well, the white people are bad and the black people are good, in the setting of a slave plantation where white people are claiming to own black people. And in that setting, yeah, but it isn't because that's sort of built into anybody's like genetics. It's because that was the culture and that was the mentality. So we needed something to immediately say, this isn't about black and white. This isn't about race at all, even though, in the setting of the story, obviously that's a thing. And so the dynamics between Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, the slave owner and his consultant, that was actually fun to write because it was sort of awkwardly weird in both directions. They didn't just get along. Smith is basically, he's sociopath, but he's also a genius. So Jones can't even keep up with him. The slave owner doesn't even know what's going on half the time. So it's like it's obviously an inherently uncomfortable thing, especially because that was real life, and that was real life where we filmed that not too long ago. But it was, I mean, of course, the cast was all professional, and they, both sides of that dynamic did such an awesome job of portraying it. There's a thing I'm tempted to say, but it might be too much of a spoiler, so I'm not going to.
Okay,
But
I
I had a
appreciate you
chance
not
to,
spoiling it for people.
yeah, but I had a chance
'Cause-
to talk to the cast about like what it's representing, because the whole this group good, that group bad is not the message, and I hope nobody who comes out the other end thinks that that was the message. I think it shows something way more important and way more profound. That's just a a thing about humanity and what we are taught to believe, that has nothing to do with what color our skin is or where we were born or anything of the sort.
No, and I mean, when I started looking into my family history and stuff, a lot of my family would have been what you call indentured servants, which are voluntary slaves. So there
Mhm.
were a lot of them at the time too. And they weren't all just black. There were, like, you portrayed an Irish, would it be indentured servant or slave,
Yeah,
or what? The
yeah.
indentured
And I
servant part?
Yep, and I was
Okay.
mostly just in the background, but yeah, I was Irish indentured servant in the background acting as a thug, and that actually comes up more in the novel, where the Smith talks about how the indentured servants imagine themselves to be in a much, superior position to the slaves, and like, I'm better than you. So you have this hierarchy of everyone wanting to think they're better than everybody else, even though it's in the same situation. But yeah, in the movie version, I'm just sort of this background character that just gives everybody evil looks and stuff. But yeah, I was the slavery, but not really slavery example, or the other way around.
One thing I didn't see here on that I didn't check it out in depth. If people want to watch the movie, I didn't
Yeah.
notice a link on the website. What's the best way for people to be able to get access to the movie?
Yeah, the website for the movie is jonesplantationfilm.com, with no
Jones
the in it, just
Plantation Film.
jonesplantationfilm.com.
All right, I'll have a link for
That's
that
the
as
one.
well.
And that has you can watch the movie there. You can get fashionable shirts and all sorts of merch and stuff. So
Oh, you
yeah,
have Sherry Peel Jackson making a comment. She's one of the uh, 3 people that I've had from America Freedom to Fascism. Her and
yeah,
Joe Bannister,
uh,
Joseph Bannister, the former IRS agent as well.
yeah. I
The
haven't talked to him for a while, but yeah, I knew him from way back.
The other one that I'm trying to get on, and I've had on schedule, but we've had to reschedule, is Paymon from
Oh
Freedom Law
yeah.
School.
Hmm.
So yeah, um, I love the art for the poster as well. I mean, I thought,
Yeah.
like I said, I thought it was a very powerful movie. If anybody took anything like out of context and took this as like racial, or like you were saying, one group being better than the other or something, that's definitely someone would be really nitpicking, because to me it really is a very simple explanation for just the idea of how we live today. is just the best way to explain it to people without really giving away too much.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think
definitely
anybody complaining about like racial anything is like trying to find something to complain about. Because when you see the story, you realize it has nothing at all to do with that. And
Yeah, I
it's
wish I would have
like,
had this up earlier. I'm sorry I didn't have this up because yeah, it has all the information about the cast, the merch, everything people want to find, and then to buy the film. So this will be linked down below, jonesplantationfilm.com. Yeah, man. Again, it's powerful. I'm definitely gonna have to get the novel now because I'm really curious as to finding out um, the fullness of the story. Now that I went from the 12-minute to like almost 2-hour film to now, I gotta definitely read the book. So, did you mention something in videos about selling copies of the book and the Most Dangerous Superstition autographed?
yeah, I was doing a deal. I can't really do it now because I don't have enough of the
Okay,
books in my possession. Because
no problem.
somebody else actually printed the books and is selling them the novel because I didn't have the money to do the printing. So we came up with an arrangement. So I had some in my possession long enough to do a 2-book deal, but I don't have enough now to do
No
it
problem.
myself
No
because I
problem.
have to buy them myself from them.
The other thing I meant to ask you before we move on to with the Anarchapulco stuff, do you have a like an affiliate link ticket that people can buy if they haven't purchased an Anarchapulco ticket that I could put in the video description?
Oh, I have a promo code which is Larken Polko, LarkenPulco.
Larkin
If you
Paco. Okay. Cute. What is it? Does that give a discount or just gives you credit?
Yeah, and he gives you a discount on the in-person thing, but there are virtual tickets on the ticket page that you can see for people who can't make it there physically but want to watch it all. And then that lets you watch it all after the fact too. So you can go back and watch it and whenever you want. You don't have to watch it right when it's happening if that doesn't work.
Where am I seeing I'm trying to find where it says something about virtual tickets.
It had been there.
Virtual tickets right here. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So that it can be used for that as well.
Yes.
Larkin Polka, one word. Sounds like some kind of like crazy polka band. I know you're a musician, so maybe you can form that band.
Yeah.
Did you do some of the music? I understand on the for the film.
Yeah, it was it's a slightly frustrating story because I did the soundtrack for the whole thing. But Andrew, the director, he's the director and I'm not, wanted to do a different direction. There's still a couple pieces of what I did in there, but mostly somebody else did the thing.
Cool. Then I
So
don't have a problem telling you this. That was the one thing I didn't enjoy about the film was the soundtrack to it because I didn't think it matched up with what I was watching. If that makes any sense.
yeah,
I
I know
didn't
what
want
you're
to tell
saying.
you
And
that if you created the music, though. I
yeah,
didn't want to be an asshole and be like, "Hey,
now
that
you're allowed to say
sucked."
it. I mean, I like my music better, but I mean, I made it, which means that's what I would have done for
I
it.
mean,
So
there was like some
he,
like poppy sounding stuff. It just should have been more of like maybe blues, some actual slave music,
yeah,
something,
and
something a little bit more tribal.
mine even had some classical in there because now I have my dream studio, which I'm sitting in, that can do a full orchestra and stuff. And it was a weird hybrid between that and synthetic stuff. And so my soundtrack was very different. But like I said, I'm not the director. And I knew early on, like I'm trusting Andrew. Andrew knows and is on board with the message we're trying to say. Beyond that, he's the director and I'm not. So when it comes down to like what we're going to cut and what we're going to use and what music we're going to use, like I have to defer to him. We're not equal partners who are going to argue about everything. Like he's the
Right.
director. I'm not. I don't know how to be a director. Um,
Did I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you in regards to the film was, did you guys do some sort of fundraising to get the film to be able to happen? I'm assuming.
yeah, it was all an Indiegogo film was the only reason it happened at all because we didn't have any funding and we sure as hell weren't going to take it from Hollywood as if they would ever fund a thing like this. Anyway, so it was entirely by Indiegogo and people we know donating, like a bunch of people donating a little bit and a few people donating bigger chunks. That's the only reason it happened at all. And the budget we did this on was just puny compared to any Hollywood budget. But it was just people having enough trust in us that they're like, okay, let's see what you can do. Have some money. Because that when we went to production, I think it was maybe 50 or 60 grand was what we had for production. Now it went up a bunch for post-production because there's a whole bunch to do after the shoot. But it only happened because normal people decided, okay, we'll throw in some money and see what you can do. And then Andrew, the director, actually threw in a pretty huge chunk of his own money because he's like, this has to get done. So he risked his own stuff. But yeah, that's the only reason it happened, because we didn't have, like, I don't have a magical source of funding for that.
Right.
Normal people made it happen.
And that's one thing I got to say about, I like meeting you in 2018. I mean, you're definitely a humble person. I think you could have taken a completely different route and monetized this thing in a way that, would have put you in a lot different position financially. But I know that you also have morals, standards, and things that you don't want to do as well, which I appreciate. It kind of, when people aren't familiar with you, I kind of describe you as the anarchist.
I'll take that.
Like a band, like Tool is like a music is a band for musicians.
Mhm.
You're an anarchist for anarchist. You're just like, just I did interviews back in the day with Adam Kokesh, and I know you guys seemingly used to be on good terms. I'm not sure that you are or not on good terms, but you didn't agree with the fact that he was running for president, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah. And then it got way worse after that because some things he
Oh,
did
yeah.
behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think
go
it's
ahead,
so
sorry.
tempting for people to, I mean, it's just sort of human nature. If somebody gets financially rewarded for doing things one way and not for doing it another way, almost everybody does it the way that gets them more money. And that's, sadly, that messes up a bunch of people's agenda who like, they're on track and they have their ideals and they have their beliefs. And somewhere along the way, somebody says, well, you just have to adjust a little bit and we'll give you a bunch of money, and then adjust a little bit more. And I think it's weirdly helps that I'm so, like, I'm used to having nobody agree with me because I've been doing this for 27 years. Now tons of people
Right.
agree with me, and I'm stubborn and antisocial enough that I'm not for sale, and I can pretend that it's a principled thing, but it's really just, I'm going to say what I think, and I don't care who does or doesn't pay me. I'm not going to go out there and pretend to think something I don't. And so, yeah, financially, that hasn't been a huge help to me, but I'm glad that, nothing derails me from what I think. And if people disagree, okay, you're allowed to disagree, but you can't buy me.
Well, another thing too, I mean, which I appreciate you saying that. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you were outspoken about taxes, about taxation of labor. Um, People would label you in the tax protester movement. I don't like that term.
Yeah.
Um, do you still talk about things to that effect? And then the reason I brought that up is because if you're kind of a target, um, bringing in a bunch of income in some capacity or bringing in money in some capacity could put you underneath of some position where they could charge you as well. So, I've kind of always thought that of you in my respects, as opposed to like just somebody who just turns down. I knew that you weren't somebody that would sell out, that would water down yourself, because any minute that you did, people would know that you were a sham.
Yeah.
There's no way you could water down what you've done after all this time and come off as being legitimate.
Yeah, it would be so obvious. Yeah, there is that added benefit of being broke, that there's nothing for the government to steal. Um, that many years ago, that was entirely an issue.
Sorry, I'm for some reason my screen just went blank. I don't know if yours did. And this is the
I
first time I've ever had this issue take place, and I've interviewed a lot of interesting people. I don't know what just happened. But did you hear everything I said?
Yeah, I could hear and
Okay,
see both
okay,
of us the whole time. So
okay,
that
cool.
was weird.
What were you
So
gonna say?
see if I can say it without the NSA interfering this time. Um, Back then, it was purely about a legal issue. It wasn't even about philosophy. It was me pointing out that they lie about their own laws. People can still find my taxable income report, and I give away a free PDF of the book I wrote in prison, because they stuck me in a cage for a year for not giving them pieces of paper, not even tax evasion. it was
Is that
misdemeanor willful failure to file.
the Iron Web?
No, that's Kicking the Dragon, Confessions
Kicking
of a
the
Tax
Dragon.
Heretic.
Okay.
And if somebody emails me at larkenrose.com, I can just give them a free PDF of that whole
Well, it looks
ridiculous
like
story.
it's on.
But that was about a legal issue. It wasn't about the philosophy thing at all. And that matters a million times less. And so I hardly ever talk about, yeah, there you go.
Tax
I hardly ever talk about that
heretic.
publicly anymore because I don't like. I already was a voluntarist. I already said the taxation is theft. It's immoral. It just happens that they're also lying about their own laws. But I don't talk about that anymore because almost nobody is going to put in the effort to find out. And there's so much, like, there's a whole movement of competing weird theories about it. And so much of it is misguided noise that I'm just like, never mind. It doesn't matter if people understand this technical fraud that the federal government committed. It's way more important that they understand that these parasites have no right to rule us at all. So I just don't even talk about it at all. But I do,
No, it makes
like I
sense.
said, people can still get it for free if
No,
they
I
want to.
appreciate you. I appreciate you explaining, and even though you don't like to talk about it, which I completely understand, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of befriend people like Joe Bannister. I figured having people like that in your corner is very beneficial in case something ever was to come about. Um,
Yeah.
and then I guess instead of nitpicking, you kind of seem like instead of like nitpicking a specific issue with like just focusing on the taxation part, kind of going to the root of the problem makes it a lot easier. And just the idea of would you say the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, is a way of getting to the root of the problem?
Yeah, that's by far the most important thing I've ever written. What I'd say is different about that is that's a book for people sort of ready to think about things and who want to read and consider those ideas, which is not most of the world. And a lot of what I do, including Jones Plantation, the novel and the movie, is to start people thinking about these things in a way that isn't like they don't have to be sitting down going, I want to consider some political philosophy. They're just, it's a story, it's entertainment. And in the process, if it gets them to go, hey, wait a minute. And that's, there's a lot of people who, like, whether it's The Matrix or Braveheart or V for Vendetta, or, there's this big long list of things where it's entertainment, but it can get people to start thinking about stuff. And that's usually like, I wouldn't use The Most Dangerous Superstition as a starting point for somebody if they don't already show an interest in these ideas. That's what a lot of the videos I do and the movie and like that stuff is trying to get people's brain aimed in that direction. And then if they get into it and start to ponder it, then I hit them over the head with The Most Dangerous Superstition, because that's the thing that really digs to the foundation of the problem, which is the belief system of most people, and specifically the belief in authority. But a lot of people aren't ready for that conversation, and so they're not going to read a book that goes against what they assume, and until they have an incentive to, until they want to think about it.
Right. No, that makes sense. It's definitely not like kindergarten education. It's like more like maybe middle school, kind of getting you ready for more. If you want to look at it from like the way that we were brought up, from the very beginning of the book, it reads, the belief in authority, which includes all belief in government, is irrational and self-contradictory. It is contrary to civilization and morality, and constitutes the most dangerous, destructive superstition that has ever existed. Rather than being a force for order and justice, the belief in authority is the arch enemy of humanity. Arch enemy. I don't know why I said arc. I'm like thinking archangels, and it's not an archangel of humanity. It's an arch enemy of humanity. And I mean, and you start off with the punchline.
Yeah.
For people who aren't, a lot of people that watch my content, I believe, question authority. And if they're not one that questions authority, they should be one to question authority. And I really encourage people, if they have not read this book, to get it, because it's definitely worth the read. And I'm back reading it since I knew I was going to be interviewing you, I started rereading it a third time, and it always grabs me. How like you're able to explain things in such a very simple manner. Another example I like to use is the myth of consent that you talk about. How there's two basic ways in which people can interact, and that's mutual agreement or by threats and violence to force people. And you mentioned that the first is labeled consent, and both sides willingly and voluntarily agree to what is being done. And the second is being labeled governing, where one person is controlling another. Since these two, consent and governing, are opposites, the concept of consent of the governed is a contradiction. And when I first read that, that really made me think, because there's so many things you talk about, like with this is supposed to be a government of, for, by the people. We are the government. There are servants. And it's like, well, why? And I've questioned this stuff for a long time. And I know that, man, there's like some crazy free thinkers in the Philadelphia area. There's a lot of people that I've learned from that have just in this whole idea of questioning how we got to where we are. What, like the whole idea of taxation of labor being unconstitutional, the creation of the IRS being unconstitutional, the fact that from a constitutional standpoint, our money is supposed to be backed by gold and silver and it's backed by nothing. How can they continue to do this? And I've used the excuse that silence is consent, but this has just been forced upon us, and people think that it's okay because of this idea of authority that you talk about in the book. And that's what I think is like so powerful. And it's you don't put it, it's not a hard read. Once if this subject even interests you, you're going to be captivated by the simple explanations of how you're able to break down these things, dispel these myths, and show people what they've been falsely been led into. When you use the example of slavery times in the early part of American history, if you've been raised from a child as a slave to think that to know that you're property of another individual, you're not going to know anything different, and that's the conditioning. And they've just changed the conditioning that they do with each and every one of us when we're going to the public schooling system, like the Pledge of Allegiance and all of these things. When What would you like to share about the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, to people who aren't familiar with it, that would entice them to want to read that?
Well, you already gave the punchline, which it gives on page 3, which is that the belief in authority is insane and horribly destructive, and it's the most dangerous superstition that's ever existed. If somebody, because it's so easy for people to go, well, obviously there's such a thing as abuse of authority. Like we see that all over the place. Like open a history book, you'll see authoritarian regimes that did horrible things. But a lot of people have been taught to believe, well, that was just the wrong authority. They didn't do it right. And they don't understand why there isn't such a thing as doing it right, as long as it's a ruling class. And so if somebody is uncomfortable with that idea, like I can totally sympathize, because there's a very different, it's very different to say the ruling class we have right now isn't doing what it's supposed to. Like there's a lot of constitutionalists that say, well, this part is unconstitutional and that part is unconstitutional. We just need to get back to blah, blah, blah. And then I come along and rain on their parade by saying, no, the Constitution was anti-freedom to begin with. It was pro-authoritarian. It was doomed to end this way, which is why the anti-federalists at the time were predicting exactly this. For those people who that's uncomfortable to hear, like, I feel your pain. I was raised sort of conservative and constitutionalist. And because almost everybody else in the world wanted more authoritarian power than I did, I never bothered to question the little bit of authoritarian power. Well, we're just going to have like some excise taxes and they're just going to fund like the military, and then the states will fund police and stuff. But because the rest of the world wanted way more government, I had almost no practice trying to justify the amount of authoritarianism I wanted, because it was so tiny compared to what almost everybody else wanted. If you're currently in that situation, I would basically challenge or dare you to read The Most Dangerous Superstition. If you want your position to be the rational moral position, then you don't need to be scared of somebody suggesting something different. And like you just said, that the logic and reasoning in this is pretty dang simple. It's not like you need some big complex theory of something or other. The foundation of authoritarianism is the same, whether that authority is the slave owner saying, I own you, or a government saying, I represent you. And that was a really uncomfortable thing for me to come to grips with. And it took me years to finally give up that last little bit of, no, we just need a government that, no, we don't. As long as it is government, then by definition, it's an authoritarian ruling class. And just as having a nicer slave master owning you, yeah, on a day-to-day basis, that might be more pleasant, but that is not the same as being free. Having a government that only kicks you around and robs you a little bit is still not freedom, and it's authoritarianism, and it's still just a different package around slavery, because it's still the idea that these people over here are obligated to serve these people over here, and these people over here get to decide how much of what you make you're allowed to keep, and so on and so forth. That's what an income tax is. And I'll quick throw in the funny thing that when I was reading the works of Frederick Douglass, who grew up as a slave and escaped, first he mentally escaped, then he physically escaped. But to read the part where he was basically more offended by the idea of an income tax than he was by slavery, because at some point his master said, oh, you can go get a job and I'll let you keep a little bit of what you earn. And for a while he was excited. And then he realized, this is worse, because the master can pretend that I'm benefiting from this and that it's my choice, because he's letting me keep some. So the fact that literally a former slave recognized an income tax as worse than direct slavery because of the deception involved in it, that's pretty like, for me to say taxation is slavery, people can say, oh, that's ridiculous. Look how easy our lives are. Yeah, on a practical basis, our lives are ridiculously easy compared to like a slave in a cotton field, but the underlying foundation is the same. If somebody else gets to decide how much of your earnings you're allowed to keep, that means that somebody else owns you. It's that
Well, in
simple.
addition, I mean, a lot of people have used the argument, if you don't pay your property taxes, you could lose your property.
Yeah.
If you own the property, how can it be taken from you by not paying property taxes? So obviously, we don't really technically own anything in that aspect either. So, one thing I've never really heard you talk about, and I haven't had a chance to ever like talk with you privately about this, and I'm sure it's come across your plate at some point. And I definitely am curious about your thoughts on it. Are individuals, because there was somebody, and I don't want to mention his name on air just for anonymity purposes, but he put out a documentary called The Big Plantation. He's from the Philadelphia area. This came out maybe 2012, 2013. Maybe I'm off on the timeline. And he talks about America being a corporation, talks about the 14th Amendment. Um, Basically, a lot of people say the 14th Amendment freed the slaves, but some people say the 14th Amendment made everybody a slave. And some people, when they talk about the United States being a corporation, everybody being slaves, like puts that down to a combination of your birth certificate, your social security number, your status, which would be under the 14th Amendment. Some people might call this the sovereign citizen, free man on the land movement. Some people call it the redemption movement. I look at it as a legal fiction. What are your thoughts with what I just mentioned? Have you studied it? Is there any relevancy it to you? Is it a waste of time?
To me, the whole endeavor to try to find a legal solution, like a legalese trick to get out of them, robbing and controlling you. First of all, if anybody does anything and manages to get robbed less by the ruling class, okay, cool. Like there's that issue right off the bat. There's a whole bunch of legal theories that I think are like legally bogus. There's some that have some merit, but to me, as long as people's minds are stuck inside the game built by the parasites, that doesn't fix anything. And there's a lot of, I do resent the fact that there's a lot of people who like, here, if you file this and say this and that, they'll leave you alone. No, they won't. And when I was doing the tax thing, I was telling people, don't imagine that because you're right, that makes you safe. I mean, Plato said it. It's dangerous to be right when the government's wrong. He said it 2,000 years ago. It's still just as true. So one of my main complaints is that if anybody portrays it as if, well, you just do this paperwork and you'll be fine. No, thugs will be thugs and thieves will be thieves. Now, sometimes it is true that people are enough of a pain in the butt as far as paperwork and court filings that the parasites are just like, let's go find an easier victim to bully and rob, which, like I said, I'm not not against people being robbed less. But I actually think that's still in the same mindset. It's still in the mindset of something in these magic scribbles must be our path to freedom. And whether or not I agree with their legal theory, the scribbles are the work of the parasites. As long as you're playing their games, it indicates that you think you need their permission. So if the Constitution says, well, you're only allowed to tax this way and you taxed a different way, well, does that mean they have the moral right to rob you as long as they do it within certain rules? No, they don't. And as long as people think in terms of like voting for the right guy on the throne or playing their legal games or having the right legal argument, to me, that's all the same as like, you just got captured by, some cannibalistic tribe somewhere and you're trying to figure out the right voodoo things to make them think you're a god or something so they let you go. It's like, okay, but none of that is legitimate. None of that is rational. None of that is moral. And so the whole sovereign citizen thing, I like the concept of sovereign citizen, I think has been sort of spoiled by the legalese thing.
Yeah,
I
well, it's
own
obviously not.
myself.
It's an oxymoron because you
Yeah.
can't be a citizen and sovereign.
Yeah. Because
But that's
citizen
why I
is
hate using
talking about the
that. But
subject of the
I didn't
ruling
know
class.
how else to bring up the subject to you without using that terminology, other than how
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. No, and I'm very well aware of that whole movement and have been for many years. And to me, what's so frustrating is it seems to take sort of the underlying understanding that I shouldn't be beholden to these crooks, and it spins it back into their game where, well, you have to file this with the court and like, wait, so I'm a free person, but I have to play all these weird tricks to not get robbed. Like whether or not that works, that's not what being a free person is. You don't have to play free tricks if you're in an actually free society. And so for me, and that was true of the tax thing when I was pointing out things about their own laws that they're lying about. Like that's still part of their game. And the day everyone just goes like, we don't need your tricks. I don't have to file anything. None of us feel beholden to you. None of us are going along with it. We don't have to answer your weird legalese voodoo garbage. We just don't obey you. That's when the regime falls. It doesn't fall from people. I mean, and I'm varying degrees of mean when I talk to people about this. When I'm in mean mode, I say, do you really think you're going to file some piece of paper just the right way and with just the right wording? And some judge is going to go, you caught us. That's okay. We'll leave you alone for the rest of your life. Like that
Yeah.
is never, ever, ever going to happen. And some people claim it does. They say, well, I filed this and they left me alone. Yeah, because you were a big enough pain in their butt that they went and found an easier target. And like, good for you. Like I said, I'm perfectly fine with somebody not getting harassed. But do you really think that everybody doing that means they're not going to harass anybody now? You were just like every bully, government prefers the easiest target. We'll go find somebody who's really easy to rob and boss around. And if it's going to be this big drawn out legal nightmare based on a traffic ticket, maybe we'll just dismiss it and go find, 50 other people to rob. But as long as people are thinking inside the framework of what do we do to make it so the Constitution, blah, 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 the Constitution and everything that came after is still part of the trick. It's still part of the deception. And playing those games is keeping your own mind stuck inside the assumptions that the rulers want you to have.
Which it makes sense. It really makes sense because you're basically giving legitimacy to the game. It's a rigged game, and you're trying to figure out the loopholes in it. Where you're saying, especially from the book, the most dangerous superstition is if you just stop believing in this idea of authority and giving the right to rule to certain individuals, government would be done and over with. And that sounds simple. I'm sure you've heard people talk about this throughout the years, kind of sticking it to the oil companies. So on one day, we're just not going to buy gasoline. And you can't even get Americans to coordinate not buying gasoline on one day. So it seems really sad to think, and I'm glad that you're hopeful, but it still seems like there's less people questioning these things than there are more people.
Well, here's one of the huge positive indications for me. A number of years back, some huge polling outfit, I forget which one, did a poll and asked people, if you could cheat on your taxes and get away with it, do you think that would be okay? Would that be moral to you? More than half of the people said yes. And that was a huge change from prior years. People used to think, "Oh, I proudly pay my taxes." But people, when asked, not some legal thing, but just if you could totally cheat and illegally keep your money, do you think you have the moral right to do that? Most people said yes. That is a massive shift. Now, of those people, the vast majority of them think, yeah, but I don't dare to do that because I'm going to be the one they're going to come after. But what happens when the tiny minority of people who say, screw you, we're not going along with it? If that gets to a certain point and all those other people go, oh, you mean there's like 10 million people in front of me? Well, then screw it. I'm not doing it either. It can instantly become almost the entire population and instantly become unenforceable because tons of people aren't doing it because they feel morally obligated to give money to these psychotic crooks so they can like blow up people on the other side of the world and have Ponzi schemes. They're doing it because they're personally scared.
Mhm.
But the moment they're not scared and realize, wait, there's like hundreds of millions of us, why are we doing this? Then it can collapse so quickly. And that's often how empires fall is they grab too much and the backlash, whether it's all the way a violent revolution or just people going, we're just not playing your game. The Soviet Union, they didn't have a revolution, but eventually their black market became their entire market. And people were just like, well, we have to do this or we starve to death. And it got way out of their control and it just fell apart. And that's why, even though day to day, most people are obeying and going along with the stupidity, but the mentality shift of how many of those people, if you give them half a second of a chance to not be robbed, they will absolutely take it because they are not the population of 50 years ago that thought I'm proud to pay my taxes. And they're like, well, I have to because they'll do bad things to me if I don't. That, even though it may look the same on a daily basis of, well, most of them are still paying up, that is a very different situation. And the control freaks know it, which is why they're peeing themselves and getting desperate because they know they're this far away from some little catalyst event, making a ton of people going, yeah, we're just not going along with this now. And like, we didn't dare to individually, but when we stood up and say, you suck, we're not complying anymore, we noticed there's 100 million other people saying the same thing, which means you're doomed. So that happens in an instant, but the mental shift happens very gradually.
I didn't know about that poll, and that actually does kind of like show a little bit of where society is progressing. Because yeah, we have gotten away from that proud to be an American, proud to pay my taxes kind of mentality. There was something I was going to say, and I can't remember what it is, and if I figure it out, I'll come right back to it. But I'm sure this gets brought up to you a lot when we talk about the idea of getting rid of government, not having government, getting rid of that idea of authority and giving the right to rule to those few select that we call government. Most people think that that's going to result in Mad Max, like just complete from a socially accepted norm definition. It's going to be anarchy.
Yeah,
That's what they like to say. Um, which technically it would be anarchy because there would be no ruler. That would be the only
right.
anarchy in it. It wouldn't just it wouldn't be any other out of context definition. But what does the world look like to you with no government? Like, is it gonna be a world without violence? Will there still be violence? What how does this look to Larken Rose?
Well, that's the thing is so many people their reference point is what they've always known. So, for example, somebody living in the Soviet Union and, standing in line for 3 hours for a piece of stale bread, if somebody says no government, they think where's my bread going to come from? In the US, we don't think where's bread going to come from if we don't like we can see that in a million different ways.
Right.
But it's easy for people if they think, well, government's the one that protects us. So if there's no government, nobody's protecting us. Or government's the one that makes the roads. So if there's no government, we don't have roads anymore. And in a way, the change is huge and significant. And in a way, it isn't. Like when it comes to organization and cooperation, I'm not every man for himself. It's the organization and cooperation, which are perfectly useful and completely necessary for society, will be done on a voluntary basis instead of by violence. So if people want to build a bridge, they have to find a voluntary way to fund building a bridge instead of government saying, well, we're just going to rob everyone and then waste half of it and then hire some politician's corrupt cousin to build a bridge that falls over 10 years later. So the difference of how it would look in a lot of ways on a day-to-day basis is the same. Like I point to a supermarket as a shining example of anarchy in action. Everybody involved is there voluntarily. Nobody got conscripted to be a checkout clerk or management or anything else. You get offered a job. If you want to get paid this, here's the job you have to do. And you're allowed to quit if you decide this sucks. I don't want to do that. You're allowed to not do it to begin with. So you have this very sophisticated, like insanely complex system where I can walk across the street and go to a supermarket and buy fresh vegetables from all over the planet, like which is just a miracle, and zero people were coerced to make that happen. Now, government comes in and sticks its tentacles and robs everybody at every step of the way and sticks regulations in the way that makes everything more expensive and less convenient and stuff. But people already see on a daily basis, most of what they see is already anarchy in action, as in nobody's coerced. You go to a store to buy something, you hang out with your friends, you watch something on TV, you watch a movie. Most human interaction is already voluntary. There's just this giant leech stuck on top of it, robbing everybody and then forcibly restricting the ways in which people can act. So it wouldn't be Mad Max and it wouldn't be every man for himself. But I understand why people wonder that because they haven't seen that level of cooperation and organization without this giant leech on it. But it's weird because it's like if you have a giant leech stuck to a cow or something, and people are saying, well, the leech is what keeps the cow alive. It's like, no, it isn't. All it does is drain energy, but if you've always seen it that way, the idea of removing government, which is literally just removing violent parasites who don't need our permission to rob us and dominate us, like people still want roads, they still want food. Like the market provides what people want because people will pay for what they want, including protection from scary people, whether you're talking about on a big scale or a local scale. And I have to mention that, like, one of the best examples I've ever seen is Threat Management Center up in Detroit. It's run by Dale Brown. Um, it is a shining example of what actual moral private protection against scary people would look like. They're they know the combat, they know how to use violent force if they need to, and they're really good at de-escalation. And so in the worst neighborhoods in Detroit where like the cops won't go, they're there making things way better because their mentality is not we're in charge, we're in control, you do what we say. Their mentality is helping people. And in a free market, if you're not helping your customers fire you and somebody else comes in to try. If the cop beats you up and shoots your dog, you can't fire him. You can't even stop paying him because taxes they get taken from you. So all these functions that people want government to do are automatically done 100 times better without government. But because people are used to seeing government handle those things, they don't know what it would look like if somebody else did it, even though already, like, private security, it already exists. It already is way better than the cops. And that's in spite of the fact that there are already cops there. So after everybody gets bossed around and robbed, there's still private security that does a better job. There's still private
Right.
everything that does a
Yeah, you
better
can
job.
privatize everything. But I guess what I'm thinking of is the transition to that point, because we obviously wouldn't just go from one day believing in no authority, no government, and then the next day everything is just privatized and back to normal. So it's like I think about in California where it seems that they've legalized theft. Um, in areas where crime has picked up, where they're talking about defunding the police. What about those kind of situations where we don't have something kind of set up in place? It kind of would be kind of mad, not mad in the beginning stages of going Mad Max.
The It's funny you brought up that scenario because I think what would happen overnight is if the shop owners found out, oh, you mean they won't arrest me for shooting these people who keep stealing my shit?
Oh, so now you think
Bam!
that
That
okay, so
ends that.
people will just start taking business into their own hands.
Yeah, because they not only legalized theft, they outlawed defending yourself against thieves. That's what government is doing in California, is stopping people from defending themselves. Not only
Yeah,
is the state not defending them, they're not allowing people to defend themselves. So that's one thing that I think would straighten itself out pretty damn quickly. There are a lot of things, especially people who have been intentionally made dependent on the state, whether it's people on Social Security or the welfare state or public housing or things like that, which if everything about government collapsed tomorrow, there'd be a lot of people going, oh, what do I do? I'm used to my handout and I don't know how to live without it. Short term, it can be very uncomfortable for those people. The thing is, all of the wealth that has been giving them food and housing, that's still there anyway. Government isn't producing anything of any value, it's just stealing it from other people. So when it's not robbing the other people and the other people are free to, like, help you because suddenly, wow, I'm getting robbed a whole lot less. If somebody's actually in need, I'll help them. And if somebody's just a lazy, entitled jerk, I won't. And that is the thing where you suddenly get an incentive where people who need help will get help. I mean, even after the trillions of dollars of robbery in this country, billions and billions of dollars are given to charity every year because we want to help each other. Well, if
right.
you remove the multi-trillion-dollar leech, one of the things that happened is the people who are just entitled, lazy welfare twits, nobody's going to give to them voluntarily. And then the market is going to give them an incentive to get off their butts and be productive. The people who actually need help, like through no fault of their own, they're in a situation where they're having a tough time. There's a line 100 miles long of people wanting to help them out. And so not only does that, the short-term ugliness will resolve pretty quickly, but the long-term ugliness that comes from government training people to be dependent and helpless and hopeless, that's just profoundly evil. And that only exists when there's a government welfare state because it literally it pays fathers to not be there. It pays mothers to not have the father stick around. It pays people to not be productive. It gives no disincentive for, like, trashing where you live because you don't own it. Government owns
Right.
it. Why would I give a crap? So there are so many things that aren't just like simple economic and financial stuff, but just about the human soul or whatever you want to call it, that authoritarianism just destroys. And it does it on purpose because it's trying to create a dependent population that they know is going to vote for the free handout because they can't even imagine running their own lives and taking care of themselves. And that's just profoundly evil. And in a society where people are just people and people will help each other, like, an actually generous person helping out someone who's down on his luck, the intention of the actually good person is, I want to help you get to a position where you don't need my help anymore. Because that's what makes people happy, is I'm productive, I can do stuff, I can take care of myself. So that's the goal of an actually like nice charitable person. The goal of a government is the opposite. We're going to keep you helpless. We're going to tell you that you're helpless. We're going to tell you you can't get ahead without us. You need all this free stuff we're giving you, paid for with money we stole from somebody else. So there's so many ways, like when people say people are too short-sighted and irrational and irresponsible to be trusted with freedom, they've been trained by government to be that. Like the thing of, you can't, like, don't take the law into your own hands. If somebody's attacking, you just hide in a corner and dial 911 and wait for half an hour for the cops to show up and shoot somebody's dog. Rather than be grown-ups. If somebody's attacking somebody else, protect the innocent victim.
Yeah.
And if somebody's in need of help, help them yourself. Don't call a freaking government agency. And so a lack of government will actually force people back into acting like grown-ups. And that's, again, that ties in with my Anarchapulco talk, is when people think and act like grown-ups, they realize why we never needed authority. And that is why authority trains people to not think like grown-ups. It's not your job to take care of the poor. It's not your job to defend against attackers. It's not your job to figure out ways to resolve disputes on your own. It's not your job to do anything except be in this little box, physically and mentally, and authority will handle everything for you. And so there would be a period where people have to basically go back to thinking like grown-ups, and things may be very ugly in between. But the end result of that, I think, is, first of all, a lot closer than most people would guess, because when people have to adjust and grow up, they usually do really quickly. Because if you're getting free money and free this and free that, and you can sit on your butt and not do anything, well, what's the incentive to be productive or give a crap what anybody thinks? If that gets
Exactly.
cut off, ooh, crap, I better figure out what to do about this. So I think it's easy for people for libertarians and stuff to get stuck in the economic things, but there's also like a spiritual thing, or whatever you want to call it, just the human psyche. When it believes in authority, just gets stamped down into the dirt until they can't imagine a world in which they're at the top. And that's one of the biggest adjustments, is people have to realize we're just people. We're all there is. We have to figure it out. And when people have that mentality, they do a billion times better job dealing with everything than government ever would.
I knew kind of the answers to some of the things I was asking you, but I knew the way I was asking you would kind of get you on these kind of rants that I love hearing you talk about, because I mean, you explain things in such an easy way for people to understand and digest, which I think is really important. And yeah, there might be that rough period in between of no government and us progressing, but once we get past that rough patch, that would be, to me, us going into a better humanity. It's going to
Yeah.
weed out the bad, and the good will rise, because that's what's going to make us survive and thrive, is each other. I mean, that's like, we're so community based that it makes sense. So I appreciate you explaining it that way. And I always appreciate like what you've been doing over the years, man. Drilling these simple concepts to people and just sticking with that. I really do appreciate. Um, I just got a few more questions, and I wasn't sure, like, because you don't talk about this. I know you're not like driven by finances and things like that. I know that it always helps life go a little bit easier. What are your thoughts on? Because I'm pretty sure you're not like a fan of the Federal Reserve and our debt-based monetary system, are you?
No.
Okay, I
Did
just
you
want to make
notice?
sure before I was proceeding. I didn't want to think out of context here. I didn't think you was a pro Fed guy, but I just want to
There's a
make sure.
reference to them in the Jones Plantation, to the Fed. Do you
In the book
remember?
or the movie?
I've made these Jones Plantation credits in
Oh,
both.
the credits. Okay, I didn't realize that was. I just figured it was a jab to the whole system as it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That reminds me. Well, see, there was like I live in North Carolina, and there was like mill towns where a company would own the property, the basically the whole town, and they
Yeah.
would pay people in like basically like a military script, but not a military script, monopoly money that was only good there.
Yeah.
And you could buy things from the mill and the shops and all that, but it was you were being paid fake money by your employer,
Yep.
which is really what's technically happening today with US dollars. So I'm assuming you're pro gold and silver, as a lot of Philadelphians are. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
I actually, I'm old fashioned. Um, I like the gold and the silver for the fact that they're just stuff. You don't need an outlet, you don't need an internet connection. It's just stuff, and it'll be recognized kind of forever. Um, but I'm not at all against the cryptos. I think a lot of people don't really understand what they are because it's a weird concept if you're not used to thinking in those terms. I think on a day-to-day practical basis, it's a really like it's a useful way to be able to trade without there being any central control. So of course the feds came along and wanted to do one that they would centrally control. And everybody was like, no, that's the whole purpose of having cryptos is so it isn't that. Um, at the same time, I think a lot of people then sort of played it like the stock market and they're just like doing it as an investment and they're just guessing what the value is going to be. To me, that's sort of doomed to be a short-term game that it's going to level out. But I think the idea of using that as a currency is perfectly valid. I do think there are the technological drawbacks of like a piece of silver will always be a piece of silver, and it doesn't matter where you are. In most of society, like crypto works, and it works as a there are even like ATM machines and stuff that do Bitcoin now. So I'm not at all against it. I do think people have to sort of get used to it and get a grip on what it is and what it isn't, and it'll probably wildly fluctuate for years to come. And there'll be new ones coming up that do things better and like anonymity and stuff. And I'm by no means an expert on any crypto. Um, but I think whenever people are finding ways to go around the parasite class, when it comes to trading and stuff like that, it's a good sign because again, to me, the mentality is the thing that matters to me. And once again, I have to bring up a little known story. I mean, this probably circulated enough that some of your viewers probably know it. Um, but the fact that the IRS was all upset because like we told you that you have to report crypto and some puny little percentage because you can see the Bitcoin exchanges on the you can just look at them. They're all
Right. Yeah.
because it's
It's pseudo
on a
anonymous.
big public ledger. And the IRS was like, hardly anybody's reporting it. It's like, good, because they don't feel obliged to, and they realize hardly anybody else is doing it either. And at some point, I fully expect government to go, it's going to be illegal to do crypto because they'll get too desperate. And then you'll see how many people that'll actually make the value go way up and see how many people just go, screw you, and whether there's a challenge and stuff. But to me, I'm always looking at the mentality, and crypto to me is a symptom of a very good step forward in mentality, which is if we can trade without these bastards getting a cut, let's do that. And people will find a way to do that one way or another. And you can outlaw crypto or you can do whatever you want, but they're going to find a way. And to me, that's the ingenuity of lots of people who believe in freedom is always going to outpace the parasites and we'll find ways around it. And so, crypto currently is a handy way around around a bunch of that. But the mentality behind it that like we're trying to get out of you bastards knowing everything and stealing everything, like that's going to win out no matter what happens technologically on any given day or week or year.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm definitely a proponent of both precious metals and crypto because I mean, we could have situations where we don't have access to the internet, we have blackouts, power outages. I mean, there's all these talks of I wouldn't say talks, I guess it would just be conditioning of a cyber attack taking place.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, definitely having yourself diversified, I think, is really important. And I met you at Nathan Hawk's second shit show event in Philadelphia, which was partially a crypto freedom. He's a freedom maximalist. That's what I call him. He's a freedom
Yeah.
maxi.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where I met you, and that was really cool, man. I didn't even have the money to afford buying your book to get you to give me an autographed copy of your book back then, man. I really felt bad, but I'm definitely going to have to get up with you and get a copy of my book's autograph from you. And I'm probably going to be in the Philadelphia area sometime this year, so I'll let you know. Maybe we can connect.
Well,
And
I'm
I
out in
have a
Phoenix now.
that's what I say Philadelphia. I meant to say Phoenix because there's
Oh,
there's a couple of people I know out there that have been talking about going out there. Actually, there's a lot of people out there.
yeah.
Someone in gold and silver space, ITM trading. There was a lady I used to interview, Lynette Zhang. She's from out there, and she's gotten into kind of the idea of prepping.
Hmm.
But she's got her little bug out facility and stuff. And there's a couple other content creators I know that are out there that I wanted to visit. So, one last main question I wanted to ask you is, we have this presidential election coming up. I know you're a big fan of politics. It looks like it's going to be the race between two geriatrics, Trump and Biden. I'd like to get it on record here as to who is Larken Rose going to be endorsing and voting for in this upcoming presidential election. I couldn't
Well,
even keep a
Mr.
straight
Jones
face
or
asking
Mr.
you
Johnson.
that. Or as
Pe-
South Park says, it's your choice is between a giant douche and a turd sandwich.
and a turd sandwich. Yeah. Just about what this election is. People still get mad at me because I still make fun of anybody who ever votes for anybody. Even when somebody's actually like saying more libertarianish things. And again, it's the mentality. And for me, playing their game as if it's legitimate just strengthens the image that that game like is actually valid, that like whoever gets the most buttons next to their name pressed has the moral right to rule us. No, they don't. Why are you playing a ritual that obviously implies that this stupid ritual gives someone the right to rule? And so and I know people get desperate and like, but this is really bad, and yeah, this guy isn't that great, and but in this case we have to. And I have to point out to them every time, are you noticing that the people voting on the other side are saying the exact same thing as you? Trump is so bad that we just have to vote for Biden. Biden's so bad that we have to vote for Trump. So they put this game up. They put up two geriatric control freak psychos, and you're voting to put one of them in power because you're scared of the other one. Well, how convenient. So the tyrants, all they had to do was switch from one king who says, well, I'm your king, whether you like it or not, to giving you two choices that aren't even different and letting you decide one and then telling you that you consented to the outcome. And so I know people
Yeah.
still get mad at me, and I say the same thing about the Libertarian Party, but no, don't vote. Stop legitimizing this stupid game. That's my
So
endorsement.
you're not pro Trump, you're not pro Biden, you're not gonna go on record saying who you're gonna vote for.
Amazingly, no. I vote for me to vote to rule me and you to rule you. And
That's
that's not
awesome.
ever on the ballot.
That's a good example of self ownership, man, which is something you've been advocating for forever. It seems
Yep.
literally forever. I feel like, which again, man,
27 years.
I really appreciate it, man. I thank you so much for like keeping at it. It would be real easy for someone. I mean, there's plenty of people I'm sure that that have fell by the wayside, gotten frustrated in the fight and decided to give up the fight. So I appreciate you staying in the fight. And for people again that aren't familiar with you as a content creator, as an author, as a public speaker, and all the things you do, I'm going to have links down below for your YouTube channel. So people need to make sure they're subscribed at Larken Rose on YouTube. Make sure you're following Larken over on Twitter at Larken_Rose. His main website, which you can get access to all of the books, buying the books, everything that's available via Larken at therosechannel.com. I will also have a link for the Jones Plantation where you can order the book that comes from the main website. And then we'll also have Jones Plantation Film.com So make sure you guys are checking out the film. I definitely encourage you to check it out. It's how much is it? Like $10?
Yeah.
Okay, which is really inexpensive, and you own a copy of it, so it's not like renting it. So I would definitely encourage people to support your work and buy the film, check it out because it's a powerful thing. I'm probably going to do a review on the film in another week or so. I might get a friend of mine to watch it and let's do it together. But again, I think it's very powerful. I mean, I love the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, but as far as I kind of look at the Jones Plantation as being kind of kindergarten. If you
Yeah.
can watch this and really understand what is being communicated, then you're ready to move to the next level and get yourself a copy of The Most Dangerous Superstition. The other thing I want to mention again is that you're going to be speaking at Anarchist, that's coming up the 11th through 16th of February. That's next week. People can get discounts, 10% off tickets, and support you by using the promo code Larken Pulco, Pulco, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Before we wrap things up, Larkin, again, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you've done, man, throughout the years and continuing to do. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up this interview? Anything you want to add that we didn't discuss?
I like to often close with this. I For the people who believe in freedom and understand what it is, I know it's really dang frustrating trying to talk to people when they make arguments for why they and you and everybody else needs to be enslaved. That can be frustrating. But the thing that those in power would most like for you to do, like they couldn't dupe you into cheering for your own enslavement, but they want their second best choice for you is for you to be so frustrated that you stop talking about it and that you stop doing anything about it and you just hide in a corner and censor yourself. Please don't do that. We are in a position that is better than any position that any pro freedom people have ever been in before. We have a more receptive audience and less of a negative consequence. It used to be that if you say the king sucks, they chop you up and stick you on London Bridge or something. Now you can say it, and the worst that's going to happen is people disagreeing with you. Whoop-de-frickin' do. Say it anyway, and I bet you will find what I found and what a lot of other people have found, that a lot of the world is now way more open to these ideas than they ever were before, especially since the last few years, when a lot of normal people are like, what is happening? Now they're ready to hear it. And if you're hiding in a corner because you're frustrated and not say anything, you're not the one they're going to hear it from. Keep doing what needs to be done, even if it's frustrating. I've been doing it for 27 years. I started when nobody was listening to me. Now I know tens of thousands of voluntarists. So yeah, don't give me your whiny excuses.
Yeah.
Get out there and tell the truth.
When did the America Freedom to Fascism? I know you were doing work way before that, but that came out like 2005, 2007 ish.
Yeah, that was forever ago. I think that was maybe 2005. I don't remember, but yeah, that was.
I wasn't even planning on asking you this, but do you think that Russo was taken out because of that?
It's hard to say because sometimes things do just happen, but it's interesting how often things happen that benefit the ruling class, like a little
Does it
more
seem like
than,
coincidence, you mean?
yeah, a whole lot
Yeah.
of coincidence. In that case, though, I don't know.
Yeah, I
But
don't know much about it. That's why I wanted to ask you if
yeah, they're certainly
if
not above doing something like that. But in that case, I have no idea if it was just bad luck or
right.
something worse.
All right, man. If you could just bear with me 1 second, I want to do the wrap up and stop the recording. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have links down below for everything we talked about on today's show. I do appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed here, smash that like button. And before you wrap things up, I encourage you, as always, be a blessing to others, treat people how you want to be treated, be the glitch that you want to see in this matrix, be the change that you want to see in the world. And until next time, practice change.